Hello and welcome to Chapter 10 in Healthcare Supervision. We are talking about training and development in HIM. We're going to start in the text on page 202. We're going to slide through those learning objectives. Now, first of all, we're going to define training and development. Now, training, this is a set of activities and materials that provide the opportunity to acquire job-related skills, knowledge, and abilities. So pay attention to the words job related. Now, development. This is a career-focused process of progressing within one's profession or occupation. So training is job-focused and development is career-focused. So if I'm training to do something, I'm training to do a specific skill or a specific ability, and I need specific knowledge to do that job. But if I'm trying to develop myself as an RHIA or an RHIT in your case, you're talking broader language here. We're getting into the whole realm of HIM and how we want to progress as individuals out in the workplace. Okay? Now, there are 5 reasons why healthcare organizations provide training and development for its employees. So first of all, you want to orient your new employees to the organization. Okay? You want them to be familiar with the place they're going to work. They spend more time there than they really do anywhere else during their waking hours. So you want them to be oriented to your organization. You want to update skills to help meet technological, organizational, and managerial changes, because I promise you technology changes every day. Healthcare changes every day. Things in your organization change every day. And so you want to make sure that everyone is on the same page and they're all up to date. Next, solve organizational problems such as personal conflicts or the impact of restrictive legal environment. Next, you want to improve the employee performance due to deficient job skills. So if they're not doing right, you want to give them some more training so that they're doing the job appropriately. And last, prepare employees for promotion to support retention. Now, if we are preparing employees for promotion, we are developing those employees. We're not training them to be a manager. You can't do that, okay? You have to develop skills and develop knowledge to push somebody into a different aspect of HIM. It's much different being a document imaging technician scanning charts into an EHR all day long than having all of those different skill sets needed to be a manager. So I'm training to be a document imaging technician, but I'm developing myself to become a manager in HIM. All right, so let's get into orientation here. Now, training and orientation focus on the skills necessary to be successful in the workplace. Support for training must start at the top. If your top dogs in the C-suite are not focused on training their employees, then it's not going to happen. Nobody else is going to focus on it either. So, orientation. Let's talk about what orientation is. It's a set of activities designated to familiarize new employees with their jobs, the organization, and its work culture. A positive orientation experience is important for any new hire. It's an opportunity for the organization to make a good first impression and at the same time provide a new employee with the tools to a successful tenure. Ideally, the orientation process begins with the offer of employment. At that time, a new hire would be told when and where orientation is going to take place. Now, orientation takes place on 3 different levels. Okay? So we have organizational level orientation. This is the first step in the new hire process. So they come in and they have that big, scary new employee orientation. So it's a large-scale introduction to the facility. They're scheduled to attend orientation sessions as soon as possible, and sometimes it's required before they can actually start their job. They have to go to orientation first. The frequency of orientation depends on the size of the organizations and the number of new hires. So I can tell you, North Mississippi Medical Center, they used to do orientation, they may still do, every other Monday and Tuesday. A small facility may hold an organizational orientation once a month, while a larger employee organization may hold it once every 2 weeks or even once a week if necessary. Some organizations accomplish orientation in 1 or 2 day sessions, while others spread the orientation over weeks or even months. Now, what are some of the things that you're going to learn during organizational level employee orientation? Well, first of all, you're going to get that overall history of the organization. You're going to learn about the start and where they've been, what their journey has been like. You're going to hear the organization's mission and vision statements. You're going to hear structure within the organization. You're going to learn who those C-suite players are. You're going to learn who your vice presidents are. Provision of name badges and paperwork completion. So you're going to get your health insurance, any voluntary life insurance you want to have. You're going to get all of that set up during orientation. You're going to learn policies and procedures. You're going to hear all about the time and attendance rules, how to place a grievance. You're going to learn about vacation and sick time. They're going to tell you about parking. You'll hear about dress code, universal protocol, universal precautions, things like that. Okay, you're going to hear confidentiality, such as computer security, passwords, internet access. You're going to talk about HIPAA training. You should have someone come in from the privacy office to talk to you about that. You're going to hear information about different kind of drills that they do, fire drills, tornado drills, any other disaster preparednesses that they want to have. You're going to hear about diversity, sexual harassment, and again, benefits. And then sometimes, depending on how large your facility is, you may get a tour of the facility. All right, let's look at our next level. Our next level is going to be our department level orientation. Now, once the employee has been introduced to that organization as a whole, then they're going to get that introduction to their department. So an orientation to the department is a critical step for all employees new to the physical space, whether they're brand new to the organization or if they transfer to the department from somewhere else. A manager cannot assume that because the employee has previously worked there, that they just know everything they need to know to transfer into a new department. Now, what are some of the things that you're going to learn in your department level orientation? Well, you should have a tour of the department. Important things: where's the restroom? How do I get to the cafeteria? How do I get out of the building to go home? And any other exits that they need to know. They need to be introduced to their coworkers. I mean, my brother-in-law, he started a new job in Birmingham first week of January, and it took them 3 days to introduce him to his coworkers. So he spent his first 3 days at work just sitting at his desk talking to no one. So that's not uncomfortable. Let them know who's in the department. Let them know who they'll be working with. All right, you're going to learn your department mission and vision statements. You're going to learn the hours of operation for the department, the structure of the department. That's going to include your reporting lines and any kind of communication structures that you have within the department. You're going to talk about department safety. You're going to hear about your department's policies and procedures, so time clocks, how you take breaks, dress code, how do you put in a time off request, and then how do you answer the phone. Some businesses have scripting, so you have to answer the phone a specific way. Again, HIPAA training as it relates to TPO, patient privacy, and minimum necessary. And then confidentiality, such as signing a confidentiality agreement. So we're really, really pushing confidentiality here. And then there may be ethics training, or someone may teach you how to use the equipment in the department, whether it's the phone. Some of these phones are fancy. And so you learn how to use phones, copy machines, fax machines, computers. Now, it's a good practice to immediately assign the new employee a buddy. Give them a mentor, give them that guide, someone that will help them along the way, make them feel comfortable, and help them become confident in knowing the department. All right, and our third level of orientation, this is our individual level. Now, this is our one-on-one training, and it may be done by the employee's direct supervisor or by an assigned mentor or overseen by the supervisor. Some of the things you're going to learn here, you're going to have your job description, the procedures and tasks demonstration. So someone may hands-on show you how to do that job. You're going to learn the work hours. We're going to talk about compensation issues that's not covered by HR. So if there's incentive structure to what you're doing or there's merit pay requirements, you'll learn about that. You're going to learn about your productivity measures and performance standards here. You're going to have performance appraisal schedule, and you're going to learn about that process. You may have a tour of your workstation, including your computer, your desk. They may teach you how to raise and lower your fancy chair. And then you're going to talk about continuing education and any career development opportunities within your department or within your work group. All right, let's get into training and design here. Now, I've never heard of this method before, so I'm learning something along with you guys, but this is called the ADDIE method, and it really does make sense. So when you start a process or you want to start training a new employee, this will kind of help you along the pathway of doing that. So ADDIE is an acronym. It stands for Analysis, Design, Development, Implementation, and Evaluation. Now, it's easy to understand and implement, so the method itself requires little training, and we have some examples here. So if we go over onto page 206, we have each one of the steps broken down, and then over on 207, you have figure 10.1, where you have ADDIE as an example. So this is an awesome tool to help learn. So our first step is analysis, okay? Now, this is where we do our needs assessment, okay? So in Chapter 7, we talked about needs assessment being a procedure performed by collecting and analyzing data to determine what is required, lacking, or desired by an employee, a group, or an organization. So in this case, once we have our needs identified, our analysis step is also going to identify the target audience as well as our overall goals for our training program. So when we have a new employee coming in and we want to get them oriented to the department, oriented to their job, we need to know exactly what they need to learn, exactly what we need to teach them. All right, in design, this is where we are, we're designing our actual training. We're setting our learning objectives. We are looking at our budgets. Okay? Then development. This is where we're actually creating our training materials. So we are getting example charts for them so they can see different kind of documentation, or they can see different kind of forms. You have different forms on an emergency chart, you have different forms on outpatient charts, you have different forms on surgery charts. So getting those examples, having your curriculum ready, and then also it includes what delivery method you're going to use. So are you going to do this face-to-face, hands-on? Are you going to create computer-based training for them? So whatever delivery method you take is included in development. All right, fourth step, implementation. This is where the actual training takes place, okay? So the employee is going to actually attend the training session that was created. All right, and last, we have evaluation. This is where our follow-up is done, and sometimes this is overlooked. You know, we go out and we create this great training program. We have all these employees come and attend it, and at that point, we close the door on it and we're done. We don't actually follow up to see what outcomes there are. You know, did we train them correctly? Are they doing it the right way? You know, are all the expectations being met from the training? Okay, so figure 10.1, read through that. That'll be really nice for you to have that information as well. All right, so we're going to move on down to the healthcare training methods here. Now, specifically, we're going to talk about on-the-job training, so OTJ. This is a method of training in which an employee learns necessary skills and procedures by performing, under supervision, the functions of his or her position. Now, once a new hire has completed individual orientation, on-the-job training is the next step in the process. Now, when designing your on-the-job training program, just like in ADDIE, the analysis step, the needs assessment is the first step, okay? So, we have a new employee, and we are trying to train them into doing their job. Well, we need to look at what their prior education is, what their prior experience is. Do they know how to already code? If we are hiring a person with outpatient coding experience to become an inpatient coder, we need to know their experiences so we can kind of tailor make their training for them, depending on what they know and what they've done. Okay, now most on-the-job training is done one-to-one, with the employee first observing and then demonstrating the task. Now, we have different methods of on-the-job training, and they're listed on 208. First of all, we have job rotation. This is where workers shift periodically among different tasks. So our example is an inpatient coder may spend 3 to 6 months coding cardiac cases, and then they may rotate to trauma cases, and then they may move on to obstetrical cases. Now, they may or may not return to their original job assignment. But job rotation just is a way for you to increase your skills as well as job satisfaction, because it makes things interesting. You know, you don't do the same thing every single day. Now, cross-training is when you learn a job other than what your primary responsibility is. Now, the example in the book, it talks about a administrative assistant in the HIM department may also cross-train as an administrative assistant in the business office. But think about positions inside the HIM department itself and how you could work with cross-training. Now, one thing to pay attention to is that typically people that are cross-trained, they're within the same pay grade. Now, we're not training a release of information clerk to inpatient code. Okay, that's not what we're talking about. But let's use the example of a scanning clerk. If they're going on vacation for 2 weeks, they had a big trip planned, we need somebody to fill into that workspace. And so if release of information is slow, then your release of information clerk can cross-train to be a scan tech. So you would train them on how to do that other job. And then once our scan tech came back from vacation, then our release of information clerk, they're going to go back to their primary responsibility. Okay? Then we have job shadowing. Now, this is where you are going to follow someone and basically just spend a day in the life. Okay? So we may be in a job shadowing program for physicians. They actually get people to come into the hospital and shadow physicians. So you get an overall view, that 30,000 foot high level view of what actually goes on and what's part of their job and what they do on a daily basis. One area that is super important there, job shadowing, could be coding and billing. Having billing come sit with coding, see what coding puts up with and has to deal with every day, and coding guidelines and things like that. And then the coder going over to the billing office to see what the biller actually does on the back end. Okay, then we have coaching. Now, this is a method in which an experienced person gives advice to a less experienced worker. And it's usually formal or informal, doesn't really matter, probably mostly informal. But it goes beyond training the new employee, and it just offers support. And really, it's a morale booster. You know, you've got somebody that's been in the hospital for 10 years already, and you go in as a new coder. You know, having somebody coach you along, it just kind of makes you feel better about what you're doing. All right, let's get into actual in-service education here, okay? Now, in-service is different than on-the-job training. In-service is training that teaches employees specific skills required to maintain or improve performance, and usually it's internal to the organization. That's where we get the term in-service. It's inside the organization. Now, it builds on the knowledge gained in your orientation sessions and in your on-the-job training, okay? Now, it's primarily done on site either by educators or by managers. Now, North Mississippi Medical Center, they have an education department, and they offer different training sessions for staff. So, these are what some of the in-services could be. Now, again, in-service education begins with the needs assessment. So if the HIM department, there's CPT updates or there's updates to ICD-10, then you may have an in-service with your coding staff. Dropping down to the last section in that paragraph. Now, this is talking about how there are ways for certain departments to offer in-services to other departments. And so HIM can educate other departments. So think about our documentation, how important documentation is to HIM. So HIM and your, let's use clinical documentation specialists, they go out and they can work with nurse practitioners and physician assistants and physicians, and they can work with them and have in-services with them to improve documentation in the record. Now, consumer engagement activities is in that bottom paragraph, and it is talking about how HIM professionals are uniquely positioned to assist patients and consumers in navigating the healthcare system. Now, what does that mean? Well, consumer engagement, there's a chapter which we did not cover last year in Computers in Healthcare. But in your Computers in Healthcare book, there is a chapter on consumer informatics. Well, consumer engagement activities include things like just interacting with providers, having health literacy, being able to understand healthcare jargon, and also things like maintaining that personal health record, or accessing a patient portal, or playing an active role in making decisions about your health care. So those are some of the ways that HIM can be involved with consumer engagement activities as far as in-service education goes. All right, let's get into the different learning styles here. We've got three main ones we're going to talk about. And we got a couple additional learning styles that we'll talk about at the bottom of this page, but the three main ones are visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Now, let's talk about each one of these in depth here. So, visual learners, they use the sense of sight to best learn new material. Now, they may prefer to read a textbook instead of listening to a lecture. They respond to charts, graphs, pictures, and videos. They prefer written instructions rather than being told how to do a task. Visual learners prefer a quiet environment for learning so that they can concentrate on the material. They'll often highlight or even color code their notes. When training a new chart completion analyst who is a visual learner, he or she will appreciate having access to updated policies and procedures and copies of written abstracting guidelines that provide future reference. So visual is more along the lines of being able to see things or how you organize things. Okay, then we have auditory learners. They use the sense of hearing to best learn new material. Auditory learners prefer listening to a lecture and will record a lecture to listen to it again. They respond well to being told how to do things rather than reading about how to do things. Auditory learners might read material out loud, and they may prefer to listen to music while reading or working. When training a new chart completion analyst who is an auditory learner, he or she might prefer group discussions with other analysts to learn new skills. Then we have our kinesthetic learners. These use the sense of touch to best learn new material. They favor a hands-on approach to learning so they can feel and manipulate the material. They prefer participating in a demonstration of the process rather than reading about it or listening about it. When training a new chart completion analyst who is a kinesthetic learner, he or she will need to get up and move around every so often. These learners get fidgety and lose concentration if asked to sit for too long. In addition, it may be beneficial to introduce the kinesthetic learner to the EHR chart completion tool and allow them to click through screens rather than reading through a manual or listening to a lecture. Now, training methods that combine visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning styles are going to be most effective. When it comes to retention of material, most people remember 10% of what they hear, 20% of what they hear and see, and 90% of what they hear, see, and do. Now, our other methods outside of these, which we don't have a slide for, but these are some other types of learning styles outside of visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. So first of all, we have relationship oriented. Okay, these people focus on the individual first and data second. Okay, so a good strategy for these people is use stories to convey new concepts. So if I can relate something to you through a story, then you may be a relationship oriented learner. If you're a bottom line oriented learner, you focus on data and facts first and the individual second. So in this situation, you want information clearly and concisely, no hesitation, no indecisiveness. You want the bottom line. Then we have logical people. Oh, bless the logical people. These people are interested in facts and reasoned conclusions. A good strategy for this learning style is to include background information so that they have all of the data they need for learning. Give them the time they need to gather facts and then process the information. Then we have creative people. I'm somewhere between logical and creative, I think. So these people make quick decisions and often change direction. A good strategy for this learning style is to use a fast-paced and varied training method to impart information. And creative people don't want a whole lot of technical detail. You know, we kind of fly by the seat of our pants here. So you go give all that technical information to that logical learner. Now, the thing about learning, especially when we talk about adult learners, is that adult learners appreciate knowing the purpose behind the learning. And I've seen that to be true in my career in HIM as a manager. You know, we have new systems coming along and we have new processes in place, or you're training a new person on a new job. And I have found that it is so important for me to let them understand why they're doing something, the way they're doing it, or how they're doing it, so that you just get the why. You understand. When you understand why you're doing something, it's much easier for you to do it. You know, you can think through the process of, okay, well, I need to look for the history and physical, and I need to check and make sure that it is no longer than 30 days outside of the admission date. If I don't have it, then we're going to get dinged by Joint Commission because they say history and physicals have to be on the chart within 24 hours of admission or prior to surgery, but I can use one from a clinic as long as it's within 30 days of admission. So teaching them the how, the why makes all the difference in the world at sometimes. All right, let's get into staff development. How are we going to develop our staff? Now, this section here is pretty cool. We're getting into actually training employees and how we go about doing that. Now, it talks about how a credential, we get into credentials and we get into licensing, and then we start talking about continuing education. Now, a credential is a formal agreement granting an individual permission to practice in a profession. So a credential, we have those as HIM professionals. So a HEMA grants credentials. My RHIA is a credential. Your RHIT will be a credential. Now, a license is a legal authorization granted by a state to an individual that allows them to provide healthcare services. So we're talking about a medical license or a nursing license. Now, both require an applicant to pass a certification exam, and both participate or require them to participate in continuing education. You'll learn, if you haven't already, that when you have your RHIT, To maintain that RHIT credential, you're going to have 20 hours of continuing education every 2 years. Okay? Now, because of this, because as a credential holder or a license holder, healthcare professions and healthcare professionals, this is a place of lifelong learning, okay? You can't work in healthcare and not continue to learn. You have to continue to learn or you will be left behind. Now, continuing education is training that enables employees to remain current with advancing knowledge in their profession. So again, healthcare changes every day, so you have to keep up. Now, how do we go about getting this training? How do we get these CE hours? Well, we got lots of different ways here. First of all, we have classroom learning. Classroom learning is traditional. It's usually best when we need to get information out to big groups of people in a factual nature, okay? Now, usually it's low cost. We're not spending a lot of money. There's no extensive travel. So classroom learning, this is going to be, how we possibly share coding updates with our coders in our department, okay? Next, we have self-directed learning, okay? This allows the participants to control their learning and go with their own pace. So, hence the term self-directed. Now, examples of a self-directed learner is going to be you outside of class time studying and preparing for your RHIT exam. You're going to work at your pace. You're going to work on what domains concern you the most. Nobody's pushing you or telling you, hey, you got to do this, hey, you got to do that, outside of the classroom. Okay, then we have simulation. Simulation is where we're going to give practical experience beyond what can occur in a classroom. Now, it could be in a group setting or it can be an individual setting, but typically the learner is going to be presented with some kind of scenario, and then they've got to figure out how to deal with that situation. And so within simulation, that's where we might have, which we had a simulation here back in, maybe it was February of last year, I'm not sure. We had professional development and we had an active shooter drill. That was so crazy, but it was a real life simulation where someone from the police department played a role and they actually came and they fired off blank rounds in the building, yelling, cussing, hollering, scaring everybody half to death. But it was important because then we had that adrenaline pumping. We knew what we needed to do. Now, in role playing, you kind of got somewhat of the same thing. Simulation, it could just be occurring and then you have to react. You have to figure out what to do. But in role playing, if I want to beef up my interview skills as a manager, like let's say I've got a couple of positions I need to hire for and I'm going to need to be in an interview. Let's say I do role play with another staff member and I ask them questions and then let them answer and then I come up with follow-up questions. So I'm actually playing the role of interviewer at that time. All right, over on the next page, we got seminars and workshops. Now, these are typically held off-site and they are topic specific. So they may be produced by a HEMA, they could be done by the state component associations like Ms. HEMA. And so if I go to the state meeting in June, then I'm attending a workshop or I'm attending a seminar, okay? Now, these can be expensive, especially if you've got a large group. Now, the state meeting is usually not expensive. It's less than a couple $100s to go down and get some continuing education hours here. But if you go to a HEMA, that's a few $100s. And I went to the Assembly on Education through a HEMA this past summer, and it was $500. But I did get about 17 CE hours, so it was pretty good. So again, those are a little more expensive than if you had the training on site yourself. All right, and let's talk about e-learning. E-learning, again, e-learning refers to the use of electronic technologies for training. So we have distance learning. So the instructor, the classroom, the students, they're not all in the same location at the same time. So think about online classes here at college. In distance learning, typically there are even your hybrid courses here through the HIT program is you're assigned work every week and you have to turn it in by a certain time and you have to take tests by a certain time, but you can do that remotely. You're not in the classroom receiving that education. So don't get it confused with self-directed learning where you can go at your own pace, but e-learning and your distance learning is more along the lines of you're going to submit assignments to me, but you don't have to come to the classroom and listen to lecture. So let's cover quickly audio conferencing. So if I pick up the phone and I can listen to meetings, distance meetings, if somebody's in Jackson, somebody's in Memphis, and somebody's in Birmingham, and somebody's in Orlando, and we all need to get on the phone and talk, we can do video conferencing here. You can do things like video conferencing, so we can see each other or we can see a slide deck on the screen. And so within video conferencing, we have what we call webinars. These are just little short web-based seminars. And then you can have a webcast. That's actually similar to like a TV show, so just a little short, sweet infomercial almost. And then what we have next is our web-based training and our internet training, internet, intranet. And the other two terms that I want you to be familiar with are synchronous and asynchronous. Okay, so in a synchronous training, everybody's there and listening and doing at the same time. Okay, so the instructor, if we're talking about in a webinar, if it's a live webinar, then the instructor is talking at the same time I'm listening. Okay, if it's asynchronous, then maybe they recorded the webinar and I go back and I play it 5 days later because I couldn't listen to it at the same time. So you have synchronous where everybody's listening and doing at the same time. Asynchronous is where it does not necessarily happen at the same time. Okay, they're not present at the same time, the instructor and the students. All right, let's get over into professional career development over on 213. Now, 213, we get into how career development is the activity that affects an employee's growth over his or her career. It's a highly unique endeavor, even though the process involves others. Professional development means an employee is looking to the future and planning for his or her next job and then the job after that. The objective of career development is to expand the capabilities of staff beyond a narrow range of skills toward a more holistically prepared person. An individual may choose to expand his or her skill range by earning additional degrees via a university education. Now, online education has increased access to higher education and removed the geographic restrictions for many individuals seeking a higher degree. Again, I received my bachelor's degree online through the University of Alabama at Birmingham. I never stepped foot onto campus. I never had to. Did everything 100% remotely. And a lot of people would not have the degrees that they have today if it was not for online education. All right, so let's get down into mentoring here. This is a type of coaching and training in which an individual, and they could be called the protege, is matched with a more experienced individual. This is our mentor, and they serve as an advisor or a counselor. Now, it's generally a one-to-one experience, although a person may mentor more than one individual at a time. So I can be a mentor, and I may have 2 proteges, but I don't necessarily meet with them at the same time. I may be mentoring them on different things. Now, moving over to the next page, we get into succession planning. Now, succession planning is a specific type of promotional plan in which senior level position openings are anticipated and candidates are identified from within the organization. They are giving training through formal education, job rotation, and mentoring so that they can eventually assume these positions. So If the HIM director is looking to retire in the next 5 years, and they have that date on the calendar already, and they know that there's a manager within the department that would be a great fit for that position, then they start grooming them now. They mentor them. They help them get the education that they may need. If that master's degree is required, then they've got time to get that degree. They allow them to rotate through the department to learn the different positions, to learn everything so that they're even more well-rounded and more prepared to take on that plan. Succession planning makes sense for a number of reasons. So when individuals leave key positions due to promotion, retirement, extended illness, or whether they're just separating from the organization, it's critical to have a backup in place so the work continues. Things don't just stop in the department when your director leaves. The show has to go on, and so you have to leave behind capable people that can step into that role seamlessly, and again, the show goes on. All right, in that bottom section, it goes on into talking about career assistance. It talks about how the Council on Excellence, or Council on Education Excellence, they develop competencies that you can go look at in Appendix A that address the learning and knowledge needs that HIM professionals are going to have to move forward in the profession. So that's something interesting that you can go out and look on and check out. Now, this chapter kept pretty short and sweet. So again, happy studying, happy reading, and go out and figure out what type of learner you are. Are you visual? Are you auditory? Are you kinesthetic? Because one of your assignments is going to be some training. There's some emergency training going on, and you have to prepare that training for the different types of learners. Prepare it for a visual learner, prepare it for an auditory learner, and prepare it for a kinesthetic learner. So happy reading, happy